Today is January 4th, 2013, and my name is Avi Master. I'm interviewing Charlotte Smokler, who has lived in Boulder since 1971.
No, since 68.
Oh, since 68 in this house, since 71.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
The interview is being recorded for Maria Rogers' Oral History Program and for the Jewish Oral History Project, whose mission is to document what Jewish life and the life of Jews were like in the mid-20th century in Boulder, a time when an influx of Jews created Boulder's first sustained Jewish community, which resulted in the thriving Jewish institutions we have today. And thank you very much for doing this interview.
You're very welcome.
All right, I'm going to begin with a very simple question. When and where were you born?
I was born in Lvov, Poland in 1933. And that's spelled L-W-O-W, except it is now in Ukraine and it's spelled L-V-I-V.
Ah.
Yeah. And it was originally called Lemberg, which is the name that many people know it by, when it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
You were born there, and then when did you come over to the United States?
We came to America, I think in January 39. I'm not absolutely positive, but around then. So it was a very good time to leave Poland. Very good time.
You got out as Hitler was marching in?
No. The war started September of that year. We got out because that was when we happened to get our visas and our documents to come. And my father had his family here, his parents and a brother and two brothers, and he wanted to come to America.
I see, they were already here.
Yes.
And you came over to New York?
To New York, to the Lower East Side, yeah.
And did you grow up in the Lower East Side?
I grew up in the Lower East Side, on 5th Street between Avenue C and D. We lived in maybe 3 or 4 different buildings and then one block, yeah.
Can you just share a bit about what you remember of that growing up experience?
Well, you know, it was the Lower East Side after its great period, maybe, but it was still mostly Jewish. And my parents had a fruit store on 5th Street, fruit and vegetable store on 5th Street, that they started, I think, with $25, and it was still in the Depression, and that's how we survived. My parents worked all the time. I mean, that's what I remember best. My father would go in the middle of the night to Washington Street Market, which was then in Manhattan. And, you know, after working all day, he'd get up at 1 a.m. and go to this market. He took me there once. It was very interesting because in the middle of the night, it was like Les Halles in Paris. It was absolutely bright. It was lively. It was just like the middle of the day, yeah.
Do you remember how old you were when he took you there?
Well, I was probably, you know, who knows, 8, 9, something like that. And my mother, again, worked, you know, they worked so hard. At first we lived in back of the store, and then we lived in different apartments in that street. The thing I remember best is that when I went to public school 15, which is right across the street, and they were bugging me to get a notice from a dentist, you know, and my parents were so busy. So down the street, at the end of the street, there was a dentist. I walked over there, and I was 7 years old, but I walked over there and I went up, and I still remember he was obviously some kind of a character out of a novel. He was a failure. He had gotten this degree, but he wasn't doing well. And he did treat me. I don't remember if he sent my parents, how it was. What I do remember is I'm sitting on this sack of potatoes in one of the back rooms, and my mother says to me, "Where have you been?" And I said, "I've been to the dentist." I remember that story very well. So that's an excerpt from my childhood.
Would you say that that kind of independence and resourcefulness was indicative of you as a little girl?
Not at all. I think I've always been rather passive, as a matter of fact, not terribly resourceful.
So that was an instance.
That was an instance.
An independent and resourceful Charlotte. And what about brothers and sisters?
I have a brother. Well, he died 4 years ago. My brother, Emanuel Sternberg, Mendy, we called him. I was always Scheindl at home. And yes, and we were always close throughout our lives. He was my brother, older brother by 5 years. Yeah.
And how were you referred to at home?
Scheindl, which is a very ordinary Yiddish name. It's a name like Mary or Jane or something. Scheindl, And that was my name at home. I didn't have any other name till, I was, in college on my own and this and that. I was always Scheindel.
Scheindel. Oh, so all the way through elementary school, high school?
I was Charlotte. You see,
in school you were Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm Charlotte, but at home I was always Scheindel. But my birth certificate is Szarlota, Charlotta, and that's my name. That's the Polish version of Charlotte.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can you just describe a little bit about how Judaism was practiced in your home?
One thing, yeah,
being Jewish then, what was that experience?
My mother came from a very religious family. If you look up there, my grandfather, you can see, is a Orthodox Jew, or Hasidic Jew, in fact. But my mother was not. My mother was a thoroughgoing atheist, as far as I know. My father. But anyway, they went to high holiday services. That's one thing they did, which were usually conducted in some an auditorium, a dance hall. It was not at a synagogue. We never belonged to a synagogue. My parents always closed the store on Saturday. They would never keep the store. And the one thing my father did was that he smoked 2 packs of Camels a day. He stopped smoking on Saturday. Always stopped smoking on Shabbos, which maybe added some years to his life. I don't know, but we did everything. We shopped on Shabbos and we did everything. It was not a religious upbringing at all. But my parents spoke Yiddish. I was nothing but Jewish, in a way, religious context or any other context. That's what we were. We were refugees from Hitler. Yeah, really.
But you wouldn't describe it as a religious
no, absolutely not.
Upbringing.
No, I wouldn't.
And have you maintained that kind of relationship to Judaism?
No, I maintained a different one. I actually belonged to a synagogue, and I used to go every Shabbos for years to Bonei Shalom. Now I tend to go to the Thursday Minyan, Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. I always go to I've been to the Talmud class there as long as it's been on. I think I'm the oldest surviving member of our Bonei Shalom Talmud class. So I've done that, and I don't keep Shabbos, but I don't not keep it. I mean, I don't go shopping on the Sabbath. I drive the car. So I would say that I'm more practicing than my parents, and I also have studied much more than my parents. And so it's quite different.
And can you, there's no simple explanation, I'm sure, but can you give some kind of explanation about how you moved from, how your parents connected to their Judaism and how you shifted your practice of Judaism?
Well, they connected to their Judaism because Jews in Poland, if they were not in the upper class, they were Jews and nothing but Jews. I mean, it was a terribly anti-Semitic country. They suffered a lot in Poland, and they saw themselves as Jewish. They ran the whole store in Yiddish and in Polish. I mean, they didn't need any English for that store. So that was their connection. It was just part of their whole lives. For me, I had to, in a way, do Jewish things because you come to Boulder and you can be anything. And, you know, I didn't speak Yiddish at home or anything here. So I had to make my own decisions about what kind of Jew I wanted to be, of course.
But those choices were primarily after you moved to Boulder?
Absolutely. In New York, in a way, people, at that time, it's not true now, but in New York, so much of the population was Jewish that, and I think even today to some extent, people didn't feel the need to do anything else but exist, and they were Jews. They were surrounded by Jews. You know, it's like being French or something. You don't have to be be Catholic to be French. My father read the forwards every day of his life. That's the Yiddish paper. So, oh, noodles, go away, please. Sorry, but anyway, that's.
So, how old were you when you moved to Boulder?
Let's see, that was in '68, and I was born in '33, so I was about 35, I guess. 30. What's 3 from 8? 36, yeah.
And what was it that brought you to Boulder?
My husband had a job teaching philosophy at CU, so that's why we came to Boulder.
And was your husband also Jewish?
Oh yes, he was, but not practicing at all. And his family was more American. So they had less, they lived a more American life than my parents did.
How did you and your husband meet?
We met at the home of a friend. As a matter of fact, I had a friend, and actually her husband was an interesting man. He was a Belgian Jew whose family they were traditionally the sellers of church goods. He had a store on the in the Wall Street area of Catholic church goods, Maurice DeLue, and his wife, my friend Toby, became his wife, and that's how in their home I met Howard.
How old were you when you met?
27, and that's when I married also. We married within 6 months after I met.
I see.
Yeah.
So what did you do professionally?
I was a welfare worker and then a probation officer to teenage girls in New York. Those were the two jobs I had. When I married, I was a probation officer in Brooklyn Girls' Term Court. It was a court that has since been abolished, and it was probably totally unconstitutional. I wouldn't even want to tell you what we did to, 16. You could, be put away someplace for crossing your eyes at your parents. But anyway, it's gone.
I see.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about moving to Boulder?
Well, I'll tell you. We had lived in Europe for a year, and we lived in California near Palo Alto, and then but we were in Long Island, and my husband was teaching at Long Island University. It was awful, not a good school, and but I have to tell you the story. So that summer we were going to Boulder. And we were at a party, a gathering of some kind, and this man that was there who had taught here, or his wife had taught here, and now they were living someplace else, and he obviously hated Boulder. And he said to me, it's awful. He said, the second year the wives always take up painting. And I've always wanted to tell, when I was in Boulder, and I loved Boulder, I didn't have a phone number or an address for him. I always wanted to call him up and tell him that I had never taken up painting. So that's...
So how did you occupy yourself when you moved to Boulder?
Well,
you weren't painting, what were you doing?
Yeah. Well, at first I used to go to the library, CU library, and the one thing I'm grateful for there was that I read Boswell's Life of Dr. Johnson, the complete, and that's like my favorite book, and took a long time to read. It was wonderful. But then what I did is I went to library school in Denver. That library school, I think, has closed. It's a University of Denver. I think it's closed since then. But I went there and I got my degree in '71. And after that, I worked first at Witchy, and then at the, let's see, I had my son in '72. And I was home for a few years. Then I worked part-time at Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education as a librarian.
Say that again?
Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. You can call it WICHE, W-I-C-H-E. And then they were losing all their money, and I was laid off, and I got the job at the camera. I think that was in 1981. I'm not sure. And I was there for 15 years, or something like that. I don't remember dates very well.
Yeah.
But
so when you first arrived, so you arrived in '68.
Yes.
And this is, it's a broad kind of question, but when you think about Boulder, being Jewish in Boulder, then
it didn't mean anything to me. First
of all, anything to you?
Well, because we had never belonged to, I still remember President Kennedy was assassinated. When is that?
63.
63. And we were in Boston then, because my husband was then at a research place in Boston. And we went to a synagogue, because, just to pay our respects to whatever. And it was an absolutely strange experience. We didn't know what these people were doing. So
I know how that feels.
So anyway, but I still remember that, because since then I've become much better acquainted. But I still remember that. Yeah. So.
So when you first came, there was no sort of sense of you didn't experience I'm a Jew in Boulder.
No. We met some people that we liked. Some of them I still go to a fitness class twice a week with someone else who went to library school, not Jewish, a woman named Linda, but I met then because she was going to library. No, I don't know if she was going. We met, and anyway, she also was going to library school. But so I'm just saying, we just had friends. We had friends, and, you know, people from the university and so on, people. We had dinner parties. We smoked pot. We did what people did in the 70s in Boulder. Not particularly Jewish.
Well, I'm going to get back to your 15-year tenure at the camera.
Yeah.
But I want to ask again about, because one of the things you said is when you're in New York, you're Jewish.
Yeah.
It's just like, so what?
Right.
Coming to Boulder then somehow changed your relationship to being Jewish.
At some point we joined Har Hashem, and Rabbi Steinberg was the rabbi there. I liked him very much, and I think we went there mostly for for holiday service again. But I think sometimes I would even go Friday nights, and I since I'd had no experience. That service was fine to me, but now it's not what I would go to now. But anyway, I went there, and so we were members there for some years. In fact, once I was on the board there. I still can't believe how that happened, but I remember being on the board at Har Hashem. We'll have to check this out with their records, but I do remember that. What happened then is that there was this kind of problem with the rabbi, and it was a mess, and anyway, some people left Har Hashem and they started Bonei Shalom. I, meanwhile, just dropped out of, I think, everything. I think, for as I say, I was unchurched for a few years, and then I did join Bonei Shalom, maybe starting in all my dates are terrible. Maybe around 1950 or so, I started, and I had my son then, and. Maybe that was another reason to. But when we went to Har Hashem, we did not have a band. We just joined a congregation. But
but you did raise your son in a to be a practicing Jew.
No.
No.
Well, I mean, we
made your best attempt.
We made some attempt, but in fact, one thing he told me was that. In classes, those days, this is 20 years, well, he's 40 now, so this was 30 years ago or something. Whenever it came to a Jewish holiday, they would always call him and ask him to, and he hated that, because because maybe he didn't know anything. He's learned, he actually is quite interested in Judaism. I mean, he's not what I would call practicing, but for example, this book, How to Read the Bible, by, I forget the guy's name, but here in Boulder, and we read that together and discussed it together. He has some interest in Judaism.
Did you have him bar mitzvah?
No, that was the point. He was the youngest kid ever in the Har Hashem school. I was very eager for him to get, so he went there every year, and he was 12 or 13 or whatever it was, and he just refused to have a bar mitzvah. Not for any ideological reasons, because he was too wonderful, it wasn't too, no, he just was not interested, he didn't want to do it. I was furious with him. As a matter of fact, but of course the point is, by that time my husband and I had separated, and I had hardly any Jewish family, because my parents were not around, but were dead, and I had no uncles. And I didn't know how I was going to do a bar mitzvah. I didn't know how. So years later, when he was about 19, I confessed to him that he had saved my life by refusing to have a bar mitzvah. But at the time, I was furious, and in fact, I called his. What's that wonderful man's name? It was his sixth grade teacher. He's absolutely wonderful. And we met to have coffee downtown. And he said, "What is it?" Henry was always a good student, a very well-behaved boy. He was, and I said, "Well, I told him." I said, I'm so furious. In fact, I was tearing his clothes up or something.
You were furious.
Yeah, I was furious with him. And he said, "Well, I thought he was into drugs. He was this or that, And he kind of reassured me, and and Henry wanted to go to this tennis camp, and that's what he went to instead. But that was his. So he's never had a bar mitzvah. But I would say he's probably, and he's married a Jewish girl. So, but I'm just saying he's probably somewhat more interested in Judaism from an intellectual point of view than a lot of kids that had bar mitzvahs. But I did confess to him when he was 19. He saved my life. I don't know how I could have handled that bar mitzvah. So, you know,
your husband, his dad, didn't care about him being bar mitzvah.
Well, he did care, but I was the one that got so, you know, crazy about it. But anyway, but you know, there were these two. The face he saw. That he saw was me tearing up his clothes, but it was years later that I had to tell him that he saved my life. So that's the true story of Henry's bar mitzvah.
Of Henry's non-bar mitzvah.
Of his non-bar mitzvah, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So let's go back just a little bit and find out about your tenure at the camera.
Well, I was there for 15 years, and it was basically a job, at least in the beginning, a job that a smart junior high school student could do. I was clipping the paper and filing it in the right places. Later on, we became computerized, and they sent me east to take the class, and for a year or two it was a nightmare. You're just trying to get it organized. Not my fault, but just the way camera didn't, you know, had done nothing, and I used to come in every Saturday, every Sunday just to try to get, but it worked. But the thing there was that from about after maybe a year or two there, I started writing a monthly book reviews at the camera, and that really satisfied my soul. I guess I never realized that's what I always wanted to do, but as soon as I did it, I realized this was really what I'd always wanted to do, and I just had fallen into it just because I lost my other job. It was strictly luck. And after I was there some months, I saw everybody at their computers, which I didn't know how to use or any at that point, and I just went to at that time they had a Sunday magazine, and I said to the woman, I want to do a book reviews. She said, okay. And that was our entire discussion. And I just sat down, learned a little bit on how to use it, and then I did it. And as I wrote these reviews, and I could write any reviews I wanted. I mean, if a book was 20 years old and interested me, I would review it. You know, so it was wonderful. So I was but anyway, as I got into it, my reviews got better. I will say that. And I wrote some good reviews, and I gotten some really good letters from people, you know, whose books I had reviewed, and I sent them a copy and things that I've gotten back. So I did that for maybe 12, 13 years, I forget how. And then eventually I got tired.
That was your whole job. What a fantastic job.
No, that was not my job. My job was clipping the paper, and then that was my real job. This I did on the side.
Oh.
This I did on the side. Nobody there really cared, you know, to tell you the truth.
What was your real job?
Well, at the start it was clipping the paper and filing the clips and for example, suppose there's a murder. That had to be clipped under murder, under crime. I mean, filed and under the names of the people involved. You might do 5 clippings of that paper and file them in each of those 5 categories. But as I say, towards the end of the time I was there, we were computerized, and that didn't happen anymore. But at the start, that's what I was doing. I was, you know, as I said, and I was also, people would come up. At that time, we were very free about that. People would come up, or on the phone, I would answer questions all day, or people would come up, and I met some interesting people that way, too. The woman I went to Turkey with after I was retired was someone who came in because she, you know, she was doing some research, and we became friends. And so that was the other part of the job, talking, answering questions, answering the phone, and one time, at that time, they had a wonderful receptionist downstairs named Terry. I don't know if you remember her, but anyway, and she was from Brooklyn. So this guy, so first someone calls, and they always get the receptionist, and she refers him to me. So when I answer the phone, he says, "Where am I calling?" Because first Terry with her Brooklyn accent, me with my New York accent. Where am I calling exactly? So that was that. But yeah, so that was the camera.
So your passion was writing the book reviews.
Absolutely.
But your job was really filing and chronicling the events of Boulder.
Right.
So,
exactly.
and then meeting interesting people.
Well, that was sort of if they happened along. But answering questions, just the public. I was meeting the public and on the phone, and that was part of the job as the camera saw it. Then I think it's different now.
So, do you remember interesting things that you filed?
Well,
interesting events of.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of interesting events, but right now I really would have to think about it. But there were a lot of files. One of the things you find out is that if there's been a mistake made in a file, every like for example a holiday, say a Mexican holiday, every year when that holiday comes up, the same mistake will appear in the newspaper because the reporter goes to the file, looks up, they're not going to start researching whatever the holiday, looks at the story and writes the same story. So the same mistakes can appear for 20 years. So that's one of the things I found out. Yeah.
Before and after the computer age is no different.
Well, after the computer age, I really don't know, but probably it's the same. I mean, if there's a mistake, if you look up at the computer and there's a mistake, that also will reporters, don't have that much time. I was very, when I came to the camera, I got my idea of reporters, from drinking and this and that. These were the shyest people I had ever met in my life, but I liked them a lot. There was not a reporter that I didn't like. I had a wonderful time with a lot of the reporters. I enjoyed their company, they enjoyed my company, and that was a nice, aside from writing the reviews, that was the nicest thing by the camera, just the reporters, dealing with them and so on. They were great.
And since your retirement, how have you found fulfillment?
Well, people always ask me, are you keeping busy? And I always say no. But actually I did several...
I say the same thing.
But actually I did, not fulfillment, I like doing nothing. But one thing I did do, for 4 years at B'nai Shalom, I did see, I'm a movie freak, that's what I really am. So I showed six movies of Jewish interest every winter for 4 years. I still have my the leaflets for that because I could look at all the movies that I showed all these years, and they're all. I don't regret a movie I showed. None of them were Bagels and Lox movies. They all had to be movies that were Jewish, and but also sometimes entertaining, sometimes sad, whatever they were. But I did that for 4 years, and that was my other fulfillment, doing what I'd always dreamed about doing, showing people movies that I loved, or that I liked, or that I appreciated. So really, between the camera with my book reviews and the Bonet with the movies, I really fulfilled a lot of the things that I had always wanted to do.
What were some of the movies? Do you remember?
Well, I have but I'd have to go to another room, so that's not good. But I have a long list of all these movies, all kinds. I just can't, titles I can't remember.
Yeah.
I should have brought it in here, but I won't do that now. But I showed some and then afterwards we would have like a discussion downstairs and refreshments, and it worked very well. It was very successful. Another thing I did after I retired is that they have all these books that are donated to the library, and Sue Huff, who was then working but also a volunteer, there would be a whole shelf of books, nonfiction, and I would go through each one of them, put all the information in the computer, so that we could then decide whether we would, add the books to the library collection or sell them or whatever. And that was good because, you came across a lot of garbage and you came across a lot of interesting books. And there were books that, a famous writer, or a philosopher or something, and one of his most important books is not in the library. Well, now you can put it in. So I did that for a few years on Fridays. I loved doing that. And I would always take a few books home, and I would return them, except for a few copies. There were a few, but anyway, I was basically honest. But anyway, then there was a new administration in the library, and Sue lost her job. I lost that. From now on, they were no longer going to put any books on the shelves. They were going to sell everything, I guess, or whatever. But anyway, that job was gone. So that's the job that I miss the most since I've been retired, because I really enjoyed doing that, and I got to read a lot of good books.
You're a book lover and a movie freak.
Yeah, I don't know about the book lover because I don't read as much now. I find it hard to noodles, please. I'm really scrounging around trying to find books these days, but I read some. One thing that has happened that's very nice is that, this is not Jewish, but it's run out of St. Aidan's. There's a book club run out of St. Aidan's at the Episcopal Church. It's right near the university. And that's a book club. We meet once a week. There's no cookies. There's no chatter. We discuss. We have a book and we read it for 4 or 6 weeks, you know, a certain amount every week. And that's really almost the most fun I have all week. It's a wonderful group, wonderful people. Most of them are members of St. Aidan's, but not all. I mean, I certainly am not. And that's a great thing I really enjoy doing.
How many years have you been in that same book club?
Only, but I have to say that here I was reviewing books all these years and everything. I never belonged to a book club. Not that I didn't want to, but nobody ever asked me. And if I occasionally hinted to a friend that, you know, you're in a book club, it was always like, no, this is just for mothers with small children, or this is... I was never invited. I could never get into a book club. A few years ago, my friend Emily Rudd told me, had been invited into this St. Aidan's book club, and she said, you might like to go. Anyone could go in, it's not... So I went there, and it was just wonderful, perfect for me. But that's only been maybe, I'd say 2 years, 3 years, I don't know how long, but not a long period of time at all. But I totally appreciate it, so...
What did you study in college?
Well, I majored in English, which I think is a real dumb thing to do, because you can read on your own. I think you should study something harder in college, but I didn't, you know. There was no one around to tell me. You know, my parents certainly didn't know what I should take or anything like that.
Where did you go to college?
Brooklyn College, one of the city colleges of New York. So I commuted every day to Brooklyn.
And your brother also went?
My brother went to City College because he got an engineering degree, which he hated. I mean, not hated, he hated. When he got out of the Army, he went back and got a teaching certificate or degree, I don't know what, and he taught ever since. He spent maybe 1 year as an engineer, and I don't know how many years, many, many years as a teacher.
Were your parents really proud of you?
I guess so. I mean, it's not, yes, I think they were. It's not something that, you know, they would say day and night, but sure, they did every, you know, they tried very hard for us. I mean, they had a very hard life in America, believe me.
Yeah, you've come a long way.
Yeah.
From the, what was it, Avenue 5?
Between 5th Street between Avenue C and D. 5th Street between
Avenue C and D.
Yeah.
And what would you say, and you're clearly a humble woman, but what would you say is your greatest accomplishment?
Well, you know, people always say their child, and I'm very close to Henry, but I feel that's a kind of a cop-out. You know, children are a different kettle of fish. I think the thing I think some of my well, I think the point is that my husband and I, we divorced in the 80s, but we always remained on good terms. But I think what I'm proud of is that I'm not a very energetic person. I'm not very aggressive. I managed to keep my job, maintain the home, raise my kid by myself for a number of years. And I think that's what I'm proud of. I did it.
Like you got that visit to the dentist.
I should mention, yes, always the visit to the dentist, yeah.
Sort of similar.
Well, but anyway, yeah. So that's about it.
Good.
And being Jewish in Boulder, that's changed a lot because there's so many more Jews, and they seem to be all over the place. I just found out, you know, it's funny, our Senator Bennett, he does not just, I get the forward, the English version of the forward every week, and so it also comes on the computer. So they say, like, there are 6 Jewish senators, and then there's Senator Bennett, who says that his mother is Jewish. So I don't know what that makes him, but that's the way he describes.
I thought that made him Jewish.
Well, I don't know, but that's what, obviously it's not his version. He's Senator Bennett, who says his mother is Jewish. So there are loads of Jews in town, and there are loads of things. I mean, if you get the JCC bulletin, I mean, there must be like 30 or 40 different organizations. None of which I belong to except Bonet, and I belong to the Sisterhood, but I don't go. And it's you know, it's I'm very attached to the congregation, even though I don't go on Saturdays anymore the way I used to. And I now go to a Bible group at Har Hashem because a friend of mine goes there, and I know all the people from other areas and I like them, so I go to that Bible group at Har Hashem. So I'm getting a little less vinegary about you know, about their service, because I get to I like them, you know, and I guess it's a good congregation, though it's not my cup of tea. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would want to share?
I can't think of anything.
No? Okay,
I really
great.
can't. Can you?
No, I appreciate your time, and I do want to say that although you have played down your role in Jewish life and your accomplishments here, there really were a lot of people who wanted to hear what you had to say.
Well, that's good to know. Someday I hope to meet them.
Maybe you already have.
Maybe I already.
Maybe you already have. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.